carrying on my annual tradition of looking at the Easter eggs and references in the Shrek movies, and then uploading it like 1 week after Shrektober. Whoops. This year looking at 2007's Shrek the Third, commonly seen as the worst of the Shrek movies. I won't be reiterating any references to characters, locations, or gags that are carrying over from earlier in the franchise. And since Shrek the Third reuses a lot of locations from the second movie, there's a lot of carryover there. At the top of the movie, Gingy proclaims,
"This is worse than love letters! I hate dinner theater!"
which is in reference to A.R. Gurney's famous 1988 two-character play Love Letters. It's largely popular for the same reason it's infamous, in that it doesn't require a lot of prep from the actors, they're largely just reading off of letters on stage. And while it can be a spectacular drama, bad versions of it are known for being especially bad. In the first wide group shot, we can see a banner in the back for the Glass Slipper Lounge, referencing Cinderella. During Charming's performance atop horseback, coconuts are being clacked together to recreate the sound of horses, mimicking a gag from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The producers did this in honor of John Cleese and Eric Idle, who are both in the film, but in response, Idle actually tried to sue them for use of their gag. Luckily, I don't think that lawsuit ever went anywhere, but it speaks a lot about Idle's character. A server walks through, singing happy birthday to thee to the guests, obviously switching up your standard happy birthday with more medievally lyrics, with the server themselves decked out in flair all over their uniform, riffing on TGI Fridays. Zooming in on that, the ones I could read include I Heart Happy Hour, Grog 45, which grog is a medievally drink, so I have to assume it's playing on Colt 45, the malt liquor, and there's some form of Kiss the Blank, but it's only on screen for a few blurry frames, so I didn't quite get that one. The set falling with an open window landing directly over Charming is likely playing off the famous Buster Keaton stunt, and then at the end of the movie they do the gag a second time. There isn't a lot of real text on the newspaper that hits Charming's face, but there is an ad for Crazy Edmund's Carts, riffing off the consumer electronics chain Crazy Eddie set in New York, with their motto being, "We've lost our heads," which is some quality thematic wordplay. It could mean you're either crazy and playing off the trope of royalty beheading people. Charming's picture of the fairy godmother has Don't Stop Believing. That's maybe a reference to the Journey song. It's a pretty weak connection. It's believing instead of believin', so pretty loose in my mind. On the wall, we can see the iconic bubbled lettering of New York graffiti artist Cope 2, as well as a tag from another graffiti artist, J.A. Donkey continues his shtick of singing all the time, bursting into the room with Good Morning from Babes in Arms and Singing in the Rain. Starting around the Renaissance, silhouette portraits became very popular, so I love the gag of having Fiona's family, with her as an ogre and her dad as a frog, painted in this silhouette style. During King Harold's drawn-out death scene, John Cleese references his own Monty Python's Flying Circus with the drawn-out,
"His name is..."
Monty Python's Flying Circus had the running gag of It's Man, a man running into frame desperately trying to introduce the show who never gets to say more than a ragged, drawn-out,
"It's Monty Python's Flying Circus."
Obviously the king is saying is.
What's his name? What's his name?
So that does raise some doubts, as they very easily could have written the scene to be it's instead. And during his funeral, he's sent off in a shoebox, similar to a funeral by sea, that makes use of a returning gag from Shrek 2, placing him in ye old footlocker. Bear with me on this next one, it has a few layers. During the funeral procession for the king, a chorus of frogs are shown to be singing Live and Let Die by the Paul McCartney-led band Wings. This could be done as a nod to the song We All Stand Together, which McCartney did for the animated film Rupert and the Frog Song, which originally credited We All Stand Together to Paul McCartney and the Frog Chorus. And now here we have McCartney and a frog chorus all coming together. An extra layer to this is that in that Rupert song, the vocals for the frog chorus were provided by the British a cappella group The King's Singers. So it's all one or two steps removed, but if it wasn't on purpose, it's a heck of a coincidence. Heading into the Poison Apple Tavern, an obvious play on Snow White, We have signs all over the walls for the likes of Unhappy Hour, a martini made of arsenic, hemlock, and cyanide, and a menu for spicy dragon wings, pickled eyeballs, and crunchy children fingers. None of those are references, just solid gags. New fantasy creatures seen here include an ant, a headless knight, the Wicked Witch, and Red Riding Hood. Now, Red is returning from the second movie, and I enjoy the detailing here that she's decided to side with the villains, placing her opposite Shrek's new pal, the Big Bad Wolf. It all plays well into the themes of this movie and series about the identity and perception of these fantasy creatures. And once more in the tavern, what is perhaps meant to be a copyright-friendly version of the evil queen from Snow White. Carved into the sides of the pool table are the names Jackson, Chi, and Stinky. There's all sorts of other things on there, like 12B and 24F. I don't know what any of that could be. Their kegged beers include Viper's Venom, Death's Brew, Arsenic Wine, and Poison Apple Cider. Again, Snow White, but also kind of the house cider for the tavern. I enjoy the joke that Charming can't get the name Rumpelstiltskin right. That kind of plays off his whole deal. Once the big tavern brawl breaks out, a distant Wilhelm scream can be heard. As Shrek's ship sails into the night, I have to assume that the crescent moon in the sky is a simple little nod to the DreamWorks logo. During Shrek's nightmare sequence, the stroller that rolls into the room is likely a nod to the famous horror film Rosemary's Baby. Shrek has a throwback line to the previous films.
Better out than in, I always say.
We have a play on the classic nightmare trope of being naked at school, and the congratulations class of MCDIX would set the movie in 1409. Even though the series isn't actually concerning itself with being set in a particular time, or else, Donkey wouldn't be singing all of his modern songs. But there are a few other middle-aged things within this movie that would place it as further ahead than that. When Shrek and Fiona are getting their big makeover, I enjoy the big mural in the background, with the Frog King in the center, Fiona and Shrek underneath. That sort of cloudy, oil-based painting I think is very much Baroque era. My art history's not that great. And then Fiona's dress with the panniers, the wide hips, is something that would have been common in the 1700s. It's interesting that they bothered to ever set a time for it. But yeah, it seems like Shrek takes place in the early 15th century. Donkey sings the Harry Chapin song, Cats in the Cradle. When arriving at Worcestershire, their logo, or coat of arms, whatever we're calling it, is a sword in a stone. Pretty funny, with Arthur being in attendance at this school. The stone in question appears to be in the middle of their quad, with a plaque that has a glimpse of the legend. All you can really see is something something from the stone, and then something something rightful king. Pretty standard sword in the stone lore. Graffitied on the rock, we have Vote for Gwen with the 4 in Roman numerals, and Weasels Suck, which would make their school team the Worcestershire Weasels. After nearly getting run down by the school carriage, we can briefly see a few posters on the interior wall. This appears to be advertising for the Giants, but I think their school team is the Weasels. That could play into the idea that they're later holding a mascot contest. Maybe they're figuring it out. We have a simple Vote for Lance poster for student council, what appears to be a poster for the annual winter siege, rather than just a winter ball. Seems a little violent for school, but I dig it. And hear ye, homecoming doth soon arrive. As the scene progresses, we have this student driver who gets referred to as Mr. Percival, playing off the idea of Sir Percival, a knight of Arthur's Round Table. In the distance, there's an ad for lute lessons. The back of the school bus says halt instead of stop. A fairly standard student council banner. There's a 70s style Volkswagen bus with a couple of stoners in tow. A sign for a thread spinning class. An ad for a jousting tournament between the Weasels and Plagues. Some nerds playing some form of Dungeons and Dragons, although I'm not sure exactly what setting they would have if not fantasy escapism. Another sign for a pancake feast for charity, chivalry club, and theater auditions. Lots of standard school tropes there. Having the stoners stumble their way out of the van is a reference to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where Sean Penn and his buddies exit their van in the same way. I enjoy the PG joke here that they're smoking frankincense and myrrh, two of the substances that the wise men would have brought to baby Jesus. The characters of Artie, Lancelot, Gwen, Merlin, Percival, they're all from Arthurian legend. When first entering the assembly, as a callback to the original film, the school band is playing Smash Mouth's All-Star. There are posters on the wall for Just Say Nay, parodying Nancy Reagan's Just Say No slogan as part of her war on drugs campaign in the 80s and 90s. Around the perimeter of the gymnasium, we can see pieces of the Bayeux Tapestry, which in real life is a 70-meter bit of embroidered cloth depicting the events leading up to the Norman conquest of England in 1066. Arthur's claim that he'll build this city on rock and roll is a shout out to the 80s Starship hit.
I'm building my city, people, on rock and roll.
We built this city on rock and roll.
Sleeping Beauty being told everyone poops is a reference to the English title of the famous Japanese children's book by Taro Gomi. During the attack on Far, Far Away, we have a few shops not featured in the last movie. Ye Old Bootery, which I don't think is a specific reference to begin with, but was instead chosen so it could be the setup for a play on the American restaurant chain Hooters. A garbage can is used to smash the window of Hansel and Gretel's bakery, which is a very clear reference, made funnier by the fact that they have their own proclivity for bread and a fondness for sweets. The Cyclops is sending a postage-less letter to the one-eyed lady who lives on Unibrow Lane. I think the rest reads 2B, one eye, far, far away. As they bust into Fiona's baby shower, the Cyclops is riding the battering ram like Slim Pickens riding the bomb in Doctor Strangelove. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that when Fiona opens that secret passage, it results in this statue of her father planting a smooch right on the rear of that horse. Now, I suspect there's more to this one, but as Gingy's life is flashing before his eyes, the music running on the treadmill and the signature sound effect that's lifted from the $6 Million Man. Fitting for a character who had to be rebuilt after losing his leg. It's possible that the way he's leaping great distances through this wheat is a play on the Richard Donner Superman film, and back in the real world, he's singing to himself on the good ship Lollipop from the Shirley Temple flick Bright Eyes.
Lollipop, it's a sweet trip.
Good ship, lollipop, it's a sweet trip.
There is so much in that little sequence, I'm suspicious I'm missing something. There is an overhead shot of Fiona and the other princesses fleeing across a narrow bridge that looks very similar to a similar composition as the Fellowship of the Ring runs their way through Moria. That Lord of the Rings film was only a few years old at the time, it makes perfect sense they would reference that. Merlin is reading out of a Magic for Knaves spellbook, which is likely meant to be a play on the Four Dummies book series. When Donkey is in Puss's body, it's a gross sentence, he refers to him as a fancy feasting second-rate sidekick, a simple reference to the cat food brand. The whole body switching thing is kind of a play on Freaky Friday, but not in any seemingly specific way. Donkey questions,
how in the hands, Christian Andersen, am I supposed to parade around in these goofy boots?
name-dropping the Danish author known for his fairy tales. When arriving in the ransacked Go-Go Away, many places have been turned into bars all along Evil Way. While not direct references that I know, some of these jokes include the Plowed Pub, the Skeleton Key, Pickled, just a great name for a bar, Cockeyed, Mean Mead, The Fringe, or one that's simply called Poison. A dwarf nearly gets flattened by a runaway carriage, then quoting Hoffman's famous line from Midnight Cowboy.
Hey, what? I'm walking here and
I'm walking here!
I've always enjoyed the gag of a buck-toothed donkey trying to do Puss's cute kitten eyes from the previous movie.
Oh, kill it!
During dress rehearsal, the closing number 1 from a chorus line is being played on the piano while the Ents are lined up doing stretching for said number. Charming's dressing room has a handful of posters. The only one I can really make out is the highest tower. So, finding the princess in the highest room of the highest tower. I also think the other one is Prince of Hearts, and maybe some sort of play on Camelot? It's mostly obscured. However, in the back of his room, he appears to have a Phantom of the opera costume, one that's visible only through the mirror as an allusion to that story. Even though it's a very brief gag, Cinderella speaking to her own reflection feels like a small nod to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, with Gollum speaking with Smeagol through the water. After Queen Lillian smashes the wall with her head, in her daze, she hums a few bars of Spoonful of Sugar from Mary Poppins. Then, after Fiona checks on her, hums a bit of Some of My Favorite Things from The Sound of Music. Lillian is voiced by Julie Andrews, who sang those songs originally in those films. In Donkey's rambling explanation, he says that he got bippity-boppity booped by the Magic Man, quoting the fairy godmother's song in Cinderella.
What happened is, we went to high school and the boat crashed and we got bippity-boppity booped by the magic man.
Snow White has a little heart tattoo for Dopey. Apparently, she does play favorites. The quick inclusion of bra burning with this little sisterhood is also pretty funny. I love the detail of Snow White's singing voice being made to sound the same as it would have in the original Disney movie, playing it up that it isn't some sort of audio compression that was unique to the era, but instead just a quality of her own voice.
Flitting down from the trees they appear and to chirp in my ear.
It starts off with a spoof of With a Smile and Song from Snow White, before transitioning to Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song. But only for the kickoff moment with the cool vocals, after which time it switches to Heart's Barracuda, but for some reason it's a cover by Fergie? That just really took me by surprise. And not a reference, but I love the gag that the Ent guards are holding twigs that look like guns, not actual guns. Having Cinderella fight with a boomerang shoe, or Sleeping Beauty just collapsing in a narcoleptic heap, both got a chuckle from me. But it's the ugly stepsister who's actually contributing more of a reference, sticking one leg out in a seductive manner like Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate. It's hard to know if this was intentional, but as they're preparing for the show, and the big boat is sailing in front of the clouds, the music being played sounds a lot like the main theme from Pirates of the Caribbean. During the duet final showdown, there is a brief quote of saving the princess from this monstrosity.
Please rescue me from this monstrosity.
Possibly as a nod to Queen's epic rock opera Bohemian Rhapsody.
He's just a poor boy from a poor family, sparing his life from this monstrosity.
Mike Myers, through Wayne's World, played a major role in reviving that song's popularity. Donkey, as Puss, carves a D into Pinocchio's rear, both as a reference to Puss doing the same thing in the previous movie, but once again referencing Zorro. And with that, I think we've already covered everything. This movie wasn't quite as deep with its references or cultural homages. Ideally, I'll cover the fourth movie next year, and then by 2026, we might already be looking at Shrek 5. That's gonna be really weird to come back to the world of Shrek after all this time. But hey, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was absolutely awesome. So if they can anyway learn a few important lessons from that, I'm kind of really excited to see what they come up with all these years later. I didn't think Shrek the Third was great, but it was totally better than I remembered. Not anywhere near the unforgivable trash pile people make it out to be. It was fine. I'll be really curious to hear what people have to say on that in the comments. Thank you for watching these videos. Let me know if you think I missed anything for this one, and I hope to see you again soon.